And I was lamenting about what we did not know about vitamin A. And so I'm talking to him, and we're just discussing this. And then he goes, well, I can go cow shopping. And I was like, you want to do a project? He's like, well, sure. If Hannah can come down and feed the cows, I'm sure we can make something happen. So I had already, Hannah and I actually, and Hannah had wrote a grant to Great Plains Livestock Consulting to get a little bit of money to do a project with some confined cows that we had out at Scotts Bluff with Carla Wilkie. And so we basically took that same type of idea and we proposed to feed basically 4 different levels. So the NRC, and then start moving up from there. But that one kind of failed a little bit because the pellet that we got from a commercial mill, and the levels in the pellet was not what they had on the tag. So we ended up actually feeding a lot lower levels than we had proposed. In fact, we were feeding below NRC all winter to these cows who came off of green grass. So first thing you have to understand is in this situation, it's essentially what most beef producers would be thinking of. These cows were on green grass for 7 months, and then they came in, and then they got fed hay, in this case, alfalfa hay with a little bit of corn silage and some grass hay. Okay. And then we were supplementing levels of vitamin A that were much lower than NRC up to about NRC. And the big take home from that particular study was that those cows came in, they had really good stores in their liver of vitamin A. And yes, they did decline over the winter, but they were still what we would consider high to adequate in their liver stores. And yet when we sampled the calves 30 days after birth, those calves would have been considered deficient. So they were actually quite low, and in fact lower than the threshold. We have very little data, but some of the data would suggest in young calves at that age, we'd want to be like 75 parts per million of vitamin A, and we were somewhere around 50. So, and that would be in the liver, correct? Yep. So we did sample. Liver is the only way to go. Just to be clear, I think that's really important for people to understand, is that blood levels don't really tell you what you need to know in terms of vitamin A. And the other thing that I really think is important, especially for producers to understand, is that the colostrum is the main source of vitamin A to the calf. So if the calf is born and let's say it's weak and it doesn't nurse, or the calf is born dead, sampling the liver is worthless. And I see this happen sometimes where somebody will do that thinking, well, I want to see if that's the problem. And the issue is that, of course, they're low. They haven't got colostrum yet. And so there may be really low liver levels, and it may have nothing to do with a vitamin A deficiency. So I think that's also really important. So the colostrum is key. What we learned while we were doing this study is I had this mindset or this paradigm, and I would say that most nutritionists have a very similar paradigm to me. And that was that if you had a cow and she had good liver stores, that she could supply enough to the calf through the colostrum that everything would be fine. So where we run into trouble in my mind was if a cow didn't have good stores going into the winter and we didn't supplement enough, then the calf wouldn't get enough. So that was my paradigm. And then my paradigm completely was blown apart by this study because what we learned is the cow can have really good status, but it still cannot supply. Hi, kitty cat. But even if the cow has good liver stores, she can't supply enough in the colostrum to the calf. We are dependent on dietary vitamin A levels to supply some to the colostrum and the calf. In fact, when I say some, after Hannah went and did some more research, she found 2 studies in the dairy world. Luckily, they're very old studies, which means that their milk production was more similar to our current beef cows, like 30 pounds a day kind of maximum milk production. So just to be clear, it's very, very similar. And they found that 60% of the vitamin A in the colostrum was coming from a dietary source, and 40% was coming from the liver stores. So in both of those studies, those numbers came out very, very similar. So that makes me believe that the diet that you're feeding that cow during late gestation is extremely important to supplying enough vitamin A to the calf. So that was the first thing we learned.